Listen, I know exactly what's been going on in your kitchen. You've done everything right. You bought the good cheese, you grabbed a right pan, you kept a close eye on the heat. And yet, the cheese still doesn't melt like it does at your favorite restaurant, does it? Instead of that beautiful liquid silk, it clumps up. It separates into this sad, greasy mess with those tragic rubbery strings just kind of floating around. But what if I told you that the perfect restaurant melt isn't magic, it's just science? In this explainer, we're putting every single secret to flawless, liquid silk cheese right out on the table.
Okay, let's dive into this by asking the most important question. Why does your cheese always break? Before we get to the solutions, we absolutely have to validate those past kitchen frustrations. Because honestly, once you understand exactly why your cheese sauce failed, every single professional technique we're going to cover today is going to make complete, absolute sense.
I mean, think about the contrast here. On one hand, you've got the greasy home mess with fat pooling at the edges and this stiff, oily texture. And on the other hand, you've got restaurant liquid silk. You know, that cheese sauce at the local burger joint down the street that just flows beautifully over literally everything it touches? The difference between those two? It's not luck. It's not some impossible culinary skill. It's simply knowing exactly how to prevent the structure of the cheese from breaking down. So, to stop that breakdown, we gotta understand what cheese actually is. At its core, cheese is an emulsion. Think of it as a really delicate marriage between fat, protein, and water. And when you add heat to the mix, that delicate marriage is intensely tested. Three things happen all at once. The fat softens up and wants to escape. The protein network actually contracts as it heats up, literally squeezing the fat out like a wet sponge. And the water? It evaporates, completely destabilizing the whole relationship. When this happens too fast, the marriage tragically falls apart and your cheese is permanently broken.
Which brings us to secret number 1, the temperature rule. See, most home cooks make the absolutely devastating mistake of applying way too much heat way too fast. Dropping cheese into a screaming hot pan just obliterates that delicate emulsion we just talked about. And here's the exact science behind it. Mozzarella starts melting beautifully at 55 degrees Celsius. Cheddar hits its stride at 60. Gruyere at 65. But if you push the temperature past 82 degrees, the protein network completely collapses and that fat separation becomes totally irreversible. That means there is an incredibly narrow 17-degree temperature window between melting beautifully and broken forever. And sadly, most home cooking happens way, way above that window.
And this brilliantly illustrates how restaurants actually solve this. It's the steam lid technique. For the absolute perfect burger melt, you don't use direct heat. You actually remove the pan from the heat entirely. Put the cheese on your burger, add just 1 single teaspoon of water to the pan right beside the meat, and then cover it for exactly 45 seconds. That trapped steam creates a gentle, perfectly even heat that melts the cheese from the top down. It guarantees a glossy, flowing layer every single time without ever pushing the temperature into that danger zone.
But what about sauces? Well, that takes us to secret number 2, the magic bullet. Professional kitchens use a secret ingredient to make naturally sharp, aged cheeses flow perfectly without ever breaking. And the history behind this is actually fascinating. Back in the 1910s, there was this Swiss chemist named Walter Gerber, and he was trying to create a stable processed cheese that just wouldn't separate. Well, he discovered that adding a specific emulsifying salt called sodium citrate bound directly to the calcium in the cheese's protein network. It essentially swapped the calcium out for sodium, which made the protein chains incredibly flexible and permanently stabilized the entire melt. So, the crucial point is the golden professional ratio, which is just 2%. You take exactly 2% of the total cheese weight in sodium citrate, and you dissolve it in a little water or beer. Never milk, by the way, because the milk proteins will totally interfere with the process. You heat it up until the salt dissolves, take the pan off the heat, and then gradually whisk in your sharp cheese. That 2% is what unlocks liquid silk, turning any aged, stubborn cheese, like a really intense Comté, into the smoothest, most stable sauce you have ever seen. All right, now we need to shift gears for a second. Secret number 3, the betrayal.
There is some serious, dramatic sabotage hiding right in the supermarket aisle before you even turn on your stove. I am talking about wood pulp and anti-caking agents. You know those convenient bags of pre-grated cheese? They contain cellulose, which is literally wood pulp filler, along with potato starches and antifungals. Now, these are designed to stop the cheese from clumping together in the bag, but they actively fight against a smooth melt. They coat every single shred, creating this grainy, slightly separated texture that absolutely no amount of cooking technique can ever fix. Seriously, think about pure, fresh shreds right off of a block of cheese versus that coated bag stuff. You have to always grate your cheese fresh. Not only do you avoid fighting the bag's chemistry and that horrible grainy coating, but fresh shreds just have way more surface area for an even melt. Plus, they haven't been dried out by sitting in a plastic bag for weeks on end. They retain their vital moisture, which is absolutely crucial to holding that delicate emulsion together.
And yes, by the way you grate actually matters. Professional kitchens have strict rules for this. You want to use the large holes on a box grater for things like pizzas and gratins where you want distinct, gooey layers. Use the medium holes for burgers so it melts fast and evenly. Pull out the microplane when you want the cheese to dissolve instantly into sauces. But emphatically, listen to me here, never use a food processor. It compresses the cheese into this dense, fine paste that will completely ruin your melt.
Let's move to and see how this builds for our next technique, secret number 4, the lost treasure.
If you've ever wondered why your homemade cacio e pepe clumps up or just slides right off the noodles, it's probably because you took the most powerful natural emulsifier in your kitchen and poured it directly down the drain. I'm talking, of course, about starchy pasta water. It is quite literally liquid gold. After your pasta cooks, that water is packed with dissolved starches, and those starches stabilize the interface between the fat in your cheese and the water in your pan. They essentially coat and suspend the fat droplets to prevent clumping, creating that beautifully smooth consistency that defines amazing pasta.
The exact ratio chefs use is 3 to 4 tablespoons of pasta water for every 100 grams of cheese. The real trick here is to always reserve a full cup of that water before you drain the pot. Then add your drained pasta to the pan and gradually stir the cheese in, alternating with splashes of that starchy water while you constantly stir. The starch activates, the emulsion holds, and you get this glossy, unified layer that beautifully coats every single strand of pasta.
Okay, we have reached the final phase. Secret number 5, the climax.
Picture this. You did everything right. The temperature was perfect. You grated the cheese fresh, the emulsion held beautifully. But there is a heartbreaking 10-second window between the pan and the plate where an abrupt temperature drop can ruin your perfect melt instantly. To survive this climax, you need these final finishing steps. First, heat your serving plates. Literally run them under hot water for 30 seconds and dry them immediately. Second, let your burgers or steaks rest for 45 to 60 seconds after the cheese melts so it can set into a nice semi-flowing state. And finally, for sauces, you need to mount the sauce.
Now, what's really interesting about this slide is the professional technique called mounting with butter. Just before you serve, take the pan completely off the heat and vigorously stir in a 10-gram knob of cold butter. Because it's cold, it emulsifies beautifully into that warm, starch-rich environment, providing this final layer of glossy fat that fixes any minor separation. This is exactly how you achieve that ultimate, undeniably perfect restaurant sheen right at home.
All right, let's bring this all together. Look at this system. If your cheese breaks under heat, use low heat and the steam lid technique. If your sharp cheese clumps up, dissolve 2% sodium citrate. If the texture is grainy, throw out the pre-grated bag and grate it fresh. If your pasta cheese slides off, use starchy pasta water. And if it breaks right at the table, warm your plates and mount that sauce with cold butter. Applying these 5 secrets together guarantees you will never, ever suffer a broken cheese sauce again. I want to leave you with this final thought today. It was never your fault. You just didn't know. You weren't a bad cook, you were just missing the science. So, take a breath of relief and share this explainer with any friend who has felt personally responsible for a broken cheese sauce. Now that you hold the scientific keys to culinary perfection, what impossible recipe will you conquer next?